prepared to go in today. I wasn't contacted.
15 people were arrested on the morning of Friday, February 2nd, at Raytheon RTX and BAE Systems in Louisville, including several members of the Louisville Ceasefire Coalition. We were arrested in 3 locations blocking access and egress points to Raytheon RTX and BAE Systems in South Louisville, which are companies that manufacture weapons sold and transferred to the Israeli government and that are used for the destruction and killings in Gaza and the West Bank. The Louisville Ceasefire Coalition was formed after October 7th, 2023, to push for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and an end to Israeli occupation. In addition to demanding a permanent ceasefire, our protest also emphasizes that continued and growing U.S. military aid to Israel and the profiteering of these companies directly contributes to the genocide of the Palestinian people. We support what the International Court of Justice has recently determined, that the Israeli government is plausibly engaged in a genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. We chose to protest at Raytheon RTX and BAE Systems because they are arms manufacturers in our own backyard. And these companies are both fueling and profiting from Israel's genocide of Palestinians. These companies have provided weapons that have directly caused the deaths of over 27,000 people, 40% of whom are children. Our intent in this action was to raise awareness of U.S. complicity in war crimes through the unlimited supply of weapons to Israel being used against a civilian population. Raytheon RTX and BAE Systems are the world's 2nd and 7th largest military companies, respectively, and manufacture missiles, bombs, components for fighter jets, naval guns, and other weapons systems used by the Israeli military against Palestinians. These technologies are also integrated into Israel's main weapon systems, including fighter jets, military drones, and warships. These weapons are often gifted to Israel through the U.S. government's Foreign Military Financing Program. U.S. military funding to Israel topped $3.8 billion in 2023 as part of a record $38 billion deal over 10 years signed under former U.S. President Barack Obama in 2016. In the past 75 years, the U.S. has supported Israel with a total of $124 billion in the form of military and defense aid. Congress is also currently debating a $14.1 billion additional U.S. military aid to Israel. Between 50% and 60% of buildings in Gaza have been demolished, and the bombardment has displaced some 85% of Gaza's 2.3 million residents. Israel has cut off food, water, fuel, and medical supplies getting into Gaza and continually bomb areas they have designated as safe zones. Half of the population are at risk of starvation, and 90% of Gazans regularly go without food for an entire day or longer. And it cannot be stressed enough, these companies are making weapons right here in our community, and it impacts all of us. One of those arrested among us, Carla Wallace, emphasizes that we have needs here at home for affordable housing, for jobs, for health care, for education. Funds used for weapons to kill people in Gaza could be used to care for people in Kentucky and elsewhere.
I'm going to read a quote from Palestinian poet Suhair Hamad. If you face all this death and indifference and keep your humanity, your love, your dignity, and you refuse to surrender to the terror, then you know something of the courage that is Palestine. And I want to thank South Africa and the International Court of Justice ruling that Israel must take all measures to prevent genocide, and that also means all of us must take all measures. Instead, the bombings, massacres, and outright kidnappings and torture by Israel of the Palestinians has intensified, and our government has been supporting it with our tax dollars. In fact, they're about to send more military aid. And, you know, some people are not aware that it is our tax dollars that go to these military contractors like Raytheon and Bay, and they are making big profits off of genocide. Meanwhile, Kentucky, sixth poorest state in the nation, sends almost $30 million of our tax dollars to Israel, instead of spending it on much-needed housing, education, drug treatment, mental health, youth programs, all of the things that our communities need. Instead, Kentucky's sending more weapons to Israel and building more prisons, and this is no solution. What is happening in Gaza is not a war, it's genocide, it's ethnic cleansing, it's not a conflict, it's an occupation, and it started more than 75 years ago. The world is standing with Palestine against genocide. And what is happening there is about all of us. It's about all of our futures. Because like I was talking about the journalists, what do we think is going to happen when Europe and the US stand by and allow so many journalists to be silenced? What's going to happen in the next conflict? And we are all responsible because it is our tax dollars. The only way to maintain our humanity is to take action. Call your representatives, host a speak out, join a march, demand justice and a permanent ceasefire now. Thank you.
So my name is Bob Iden. I would just like to say that we are calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Palestine, and that it is clearly genocide what is happening there. I'm reminded on being today is Black History Month of a quote from Martin Luther King about something about we begin to die the day that we are silent about things that matter. And I'll end with a quote from John Lewis about, I feel we all together we're creating good trouble.
That's right.
And that in creating this good trouble, we are saving the soul of America. That's all I got.
I am here to talk about the ceasefire legislation myself and Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur have filed. Why it's important. I think all of the talking points that you've heard today speaks to the specifics. I want to make it personal right now. As a mother of 6 and a grandmother of 3.5, I don't know what side of the road to be on, but peace. But peace. I am being contacted by so many people since we filed that legislation. Before we filed that legislation, in my professional role as the executive director of Vocal Kentucky, we already had a statement with the other vocals for Vocal New York and Vocal Texas, and calling for a ceasefire. On every side of the road, every hat I wear, it all leads to ceasefire, to peace, and to free the people. Most of the people impacted by this genocide, this war, this whatever you want to call it, are women, are children, are journalists, are black and brown people that we're connected to. 98% of the people that are reaching out to me through email, through phone, through text, through calling my office here at Louisville Metro Council and calling my office at Vocal Kentucky, want to see a ceasefire. 98% of the people that are contacting me are telling me thank you for standing on the right side of this. There are Jewish people contacting me and telling me they are standing on the side and how can they help me? How can they help us pass legislation for a ceasefire?
That's right. That's right.
The people have spoken.
That's right.
We don't want this. We don't want any more genocide, any more war in our names and with our tax dollars. And for the people who say to me, what about the violence in Louisville? What about the violence in the street? I'm talking about all violence when I talk about this. It's all connected. how our police are trained, where our money goes, that is from the American people. So we're all connected to this, whether we want to see it or not. So I stand here on that legislation, and I want to make sure that people know that we who have filed this legislation, and we're hoping that more of our colleagues on Metro Councils sponsor this and support this. That is what the people want. We were elected to do what the people want us to do.
That's right.
And I stand in solidarity with that.
Here today, first, to stand in solidarity with those 15 people who got arrested fighting for justice and freedom and ceasefire in Gaza. Secondly, we are urging President Biden to play a major role in solving this conflict through diplomacy and mediation instead of sending unlimited amounts of arms and weapons to kill innocent civilians in Gaza. We need immediate ceasefire, and we need it now, and we need to lift the siege on Gaza so 2.3 million Palestinians who have been living in the poorest conditions on earth for the last 17 years to be able to live like everybody else in this life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone for that. Lastly, I'd like to offer my own personal statement. I risked arrest because I believe it is a powerful and attention-grabbing way to call out injustice on an international scale. We must interrupt business as usual because nothing about this should be customary. As I was blocking the entrance to Raytheon, a car pulled up to try to get through. The driver stepped out of his vehicle and told me to move. He said, "Hey, I gotta feed my kids too." In that moment, I felt sympathetic with his frustration. We didn't do this action to inconvenience people working there. I started to say, "Hey, it's not personal." But I stopped myself because it is in fact very deeply personal. Instead, I replied, "If our kids were being targeted and killed, I hope to God someone would be standing where I am, on the other side of the world, opposing their genocide." All oppression is linked, and we need each other now more than ever.